o'clock, and so I want to be respectful of your time, both you who are here in person, as well as those who are joining us on Zoom. You're here at the College to Career C2C workshop on win-win salary negotiations. And my name is Maureen Cathey. I am one of the career coaches in the Business Career Services Center, and I'm happy to have you all here. If you have any questions about Business Career Services or aren't as familiar with what we can offer you, please stay at the end and let me answer any of those questions for you. We hope that we see you taking advantage of more of our C2C workshops, our career fair coming up in March 24th, and all of the activities and opportunities we have for you to meet with a career coach and work on your professional development and the job seeking skills that you might need to work on and here as you're at any point on your journey to getting that next step after you graduate. So again, we're here to talk about salary negotiations, and I'm hopeful that everyone out in the Zoom world can hear me, but we do have Madeline that is looking at the chat and going to let me know if there are any questions. So please feel free, if you are joining us virtually, to put questions in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll make time for questions at the end as well. And those of you who are here in person, again, if you just want to let me know that you have a question, and then we'll also have time at the end for questions. All right, so as we get started, I'm curious for those of you who are here, if there are any of you who have already done some salary negotiations at this point. Any raised hands for anyone who has done any salary negotiations yet? Okay, all right. And for those of you who did you find it to be successful? Did you find it to be challenging? What were some of your just general experiences? Not anything specific, but
going into it is simply an unknown.
Yeah.
But once you stick your foot out there and say what you want, work from there.
Not too bad. Okay, wonderful. Well, hopefully some of the things that we'll talk about today will help alleviate maybe some of those fears. For most people, it is sort of an awkward kind of feeling to ask for money, but if you don't ask for what you need and want, no one else is going to be doing that for you. So we're going to talk about some tips and tricks that will hopefully help you to feel more comfortable going into a salary negotiation situation. So negotiation. Again, people often find that when you say salary negotiation, they get a little bit maybe nerves going, heart racing. It's not exactly the most comfortable situation, but hopefully what you can think about negotiation as is more of a discussion aimed at reaching an agreement rather than some sort of battle. That's why we call this win-win salary negotiation, because it's not a matter of some negotiations where you feel like, okay, no matter what I do here, I'm probably going to leave this room and have gotten the short end of the stick or something like that. So with salary negotiations, the idea is that it's a win-win for both. You are offering and going to be committing to working and providing yourself as a resource to an organization, and they are also going to in turn commit to you things that are part of that salary and compensation package. So it's not really a battle to be won, it's really more about a conversation. And most employers kind of expect and know that this might be a part. So that you're not throwing them off or catching them off guard by doing some asking and salary negotiation. And we'll talk about kind of how you can know some of those things as we progress through the presentation. So one of the things I wanted to show you was that not everyone does take advantage of the opportunity to negotiate. But what I'm hopeful is that after today, you'll think long and hard about maybe you going ahead and jumping into that negotiation kind of area, because if you don't, as I said, no one else is going to be able to negotiate that for you. And it's really a part of what many of those employers are expecting. That being said, in this study that was done by Robert Half, this one's a little bit getting older. I'm going to need to find kind of some updated salary information, but I'm sure it probably hasn't changed a whole lot in the last few years. But if you can see those numbers there, you can see that less than 40% of those surveyed in this survey, and it was of professionals, negotiated for a higher salary offer. So that's kind of on the lower side. I also want to point out here that there were also in their statistics, 46% of males negotiated, but only 34% of women negotiated. So I want you to not think about gender in terms of whether you should or should not negotiate for salaries. If you want to start out at a certain salary level and make sure that you are getting what you are, deserve in terms of your skill sets and what you're bringing to an organization. You want to do that negotiation and make sure that you're getting at that level to the best of your ability, no matter what you're bringing to the table in terms of gender identity. So just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. This is another survey that also says some similar types of things. In this one, 1/3 of workers negotiated their salary at their current or most recent job. So that's even a lower number. So I'm not showing you those things to say that people don't, and so you shouldn't. I'm actually showing them to say that people don't take advantage of this, and yet many of the employers that we work with say, hey, I want someone to be confident enough in their skills and abilities that they're bringing to my organization to be able to say to me, here's what I want, need, and feel like my value is for you as an asset to your organization. And they want to see that. They want to see that drive as a part of what you are doing and bringing to them. So salary negotiation is something to definitely consider. Another part of this slide, though, is showing you how much those who negotiated, 83% say they did receive higher pay. So it's a pretty successful number there with those who actually did the ask, right? So another thing to take note of is how much they negotiated for. So we do want to be realistic in our negotiations. You'll see that most of these fell, like, so 20%, less than 5% of an increase from the offer that was given to them, and 46% in that 5 to 10% range. So the majority of people that received a higher offer after they negotiated were in that 10% or under. So that's probably a good piece of knowledge for you as you're thinking about, well, what am I going to come back with as a counter offer? There's lots of factors to consider, which we'll talk about, but one of them is to be realistic with your ask. And so that's kind of a good number to be thinking about in terms of the percentage that you'll ask for an increase. So when we talk about the offer, what automatically comes to mind for most people is salary, because that's kind of the number that we're thinking about. We're thinking about the paycheck. We're thinking about the money that we're going to receive, and that's just a number that often you'll hear people throw around in terms of, well, what does someone in this field make? They put the salary out there. But the thing you want to be sure that you're remembering is that it's not just the salary that is a part of your compensation package. So when you're evaluating an offer, you want to think about all of these pieces of the compensation package. Also, when you're negotiating, many of these things are negotiable. So it may be in certain situations that base salary is a set base salary and they do not have room to negotiate, but maybe they can negotiate other pieces of the compensation package. As we'll talk about, you always want to try and negotiate salary first if you are going to negotiate that piece, because that is, of course, the big chunk of what you're going to be receiving as compensation. And that's what you want to negotiate first if you're going to attempt to do that. You don't want to kind of think, well, I'll do some easy things like negotiate a couple more days off and then I'll make the ask for the salary. You want to really start with salary if you're going to do that, and then either add in some additional things, or if the salary compensation goes really well, you may determine that the rest of the package meets your needs. So parts of the compensation package to think about in addition to base salary. Bonus, these are a little bit more rare and few and far between. It used to be a little bit more common, and it really often depends on the economy. We're actually in a space right now where some industries and some positions are offering a bonus because some companies are really having trouble filling some of those needs as people are switching around different roles and positions in our economy right now. So it might be out there, but don't feel like, oh, I'm not as successful as someone else if I don't get offered a signing bonus or a bonus, because many companies don't work that into their compensation package. But it might be a part of something that's out there. That bonus is usually one set, amount, a smaller percentage of what that salary is that you'll get one time as you enter into the role. Obviously, a big part, huge part of your compensation package is going to be your medical coverage, your health insurance, and retirement opportunities and retirement packages. So it's something that you may or may not get a lot of details on up front, but whenever you do receive an offer, it's really important to ask for that offer in writing and to ask for the full compensation package, the full offer, so that you're able to really make the best decision possible based on all of the factors. Now, when it gets into what you'll learn about health insurance, that's oftentimes what you can do a little bit of digging and research on. You can contact the human resources area of that organization to get maybe a little bit more detail on the type of coverage, the amount that the company puts in versus what you may have to put in, those kinds of pieces with healthcare. You can also obviously try and get some information if you have any connections or people that you know that also work for that organization in terms of what their healthcare packages are like. With retirement, what they are willing to put in for retirement for you, how they might contribute to a 401k, is there matching? Sometimes if you contribute a certain amount monthly out of your paycheck to a 401k, the company will also match that. If that's the case, take advantage of it and do, at least to that amount from the very beginning, because that will just compound. But that is a piece to consider as a part of your compensation package. Vacation days, time off. Again, sometimes that is a set amount depending on, and will grow as you're with the company. Sometimes it's a negotiable amount. So vacation days, as well as maybe a start date, that might be something that you could negotiate. Tuition reimbursement is sometimes an option with some organizations. Many organizations have maybe an opportunity for future education. If you're an undergraduate right now and you're thinking maybe someday I'd like to do an MBA, some companies will have programs that will pay for tuition. And so sometimes they'll even offer some help or assistance with some tuition reimbursement for the tuition that you already paid. A little bit more rare, but it's a possibility that it's out there. Relocation expenses. This is also something that some organizations pay for, some do not. Depending on how far you're relocating, that can be a big expense. So thinking about if you might be able to negotiate for some relocation expenses to cover your needs to move is another piece that you can both look at for your compensation package and negotiate for. Stock, obviously, if you can get stock options in an organization, that is yet another form of pay. And so particularly depending on the type of organization that you're working for, that might be really appealing if stock is a part of the compensation package. A commuter subsidy, if you are having to commute to the office, some organizations, sometimes depending on your role, they might pay for a car or pay for transportation. Some will do a commuter subsidy and pay you a certain amount of money for that travel or for parking that you have to do or something along those lines. So that's another option. Some will also pay as a part of kind of their carbon footprint and the things that they're doing to be a green organization. Some will actually give you a commuter subsidy if you aren't having to use a vehicle, or if you're doing some carpooling, if you're using a bike or some other kind of transportation. Parental leave. I don't know if anyone in here currently is a parent or if that is something that you're thinking about in the future. But parental leave is a really big and important thing to look at as well. It may seem like it's a far way into the future for you, but if you are going to be in that company, maybe when that is something that you're thinking about, starting a family, both for male and female employees, it's important to look at what that parental leave package is and what that company, how they value your out of work time as well. So that's something that you can look at. Remote work and flexible work schedule. So right now, this is huge. I mean, so many companies are just automatically remote for now, but obviously that's something that a lot of people are having to look at and evaluate, both in job descriptions to see if it says it's going to be a fully remote job, if it's going to be hybrid, if it's remote for now until our company goes back to the office. Those kinds of things are things that you want to be aware of and look at. And then if it's important to you to have remote work options, if it's important to maybe look at flexible work hours and schedule, that could be something that is both a benefit for you and so part of the compensation package, and it could potentially be negotiable. Any questions about compensation package or what you're looking at when you get an offer from an organization? Yeah.
So with the 401k, can you put that in a Roth or is it only?
Can you put it in a Roth or what was the last part?
Can you only put it in the 401k?
It depends on the organization. Yeah, there's different options with retirement. A lot of them have all kinds of different setups and what they are offering you as an opportunity to put out your paycheck and what they're maybe contributing to in terms of matching or those kinds of things. So it really depends on the organization. negotiation. Yeah.
Should you be negotiating the same way if you're looking for an internship versus a job?
So the question is, sorry, for those maybe who are on virtual, should you be negotiating the same way with an internship as you would a job? So I would say with an internship, more often than not, your internship is a lot more set in what they are offering you. A lot of the compensation package pieces are not there for an internship. Generally, because it's a shortened period of time, they want you to work 10 weeks in the summer. There is sometimes a little bit of flexibility with, my family takes a vacation around the 4th of July every year, would there be an opportunity to have that time off? You could always ask that or make them aware of that. I would say odds are, just about the same, that they might say, sure, no problem. And then they might say, no, we need you for the 10 weeks because it's only a 10-week internship. Maybe though they could start it a little bit earlier or extend your time a little bit longer to make up that time. So you could ask for that. Of course, many of these things like healthcare is often not part of an internship package. So mostly it's usually the pay and perhaps some vacation or flexibility in work, remote work or hours. Again, for many, it's kind of a program that they've developed with their internship. And so there's probably a lot more kind of set pieces of it. They're also usually hiring in a group all into that internship experience. Sometimes it's a single kind of deal. But because of that, it's usually more of a set, here is the salary for an internship. You could always, if you feel like you've heard maybe people say, hey, I got something different than somebody else did in terms of my internship pay, you could always broach the subject, knowing that they might come back to you and say, I wish I could, but we have a set amount that we offer for our internship experiences. Yeah. As far as what you would do with how you would negotiate, that's going to be kind of the same with these tips that we're about to give, though, if you determine that you want to try and ask those questions. So some job offer considerations. These are some things that often I get people that come to the office and they're like, help me make this decision. I've got multiple offers on the table, or I have one offer on the table and I'm not sure I want to take it. Unfortunately, no one else really usually can make that decision for you, but there are some ways that you can evaluate and some things that you can think about in terms of whether this is the right position to take. Obviously, often the kind of rule of thumb is this bird in the hand, right? If you have an offer and you really don't know that anything else is on the table, you're taking a pretty big risk if you don't take that offer, but there might be reasons why that is the best move for you. If you can answer that a lot of these things are not going in the direction that you want, then maybe it is time to say, hey, this just doesn't seem like the right offer for me, and to continue that job search. If they're offering you something that's extremely low in salary and they aren't willing to negotiate, you don't want to necessarily get into a job that is way below market value for you and way below your skill sets, because obviously, even with raises, it's hard to get that to climb versus starting at a higher point. So all things to take into consideration, but here's some questions that you might ask yourself. Is your interest in the organization still strong? So if they make you an offer and either you are looking at that offer just without negotiating, or you've negotiated and now have that final offer, is your interest in this organization still as strong as it was maybe when you applied, or even stronger, hopefully? Kind of what is that interest level? Will this position help you to gain new skills or bolster skills that you already have, because you still want to continually grow? We know that you're not going to stay in a job that you get now for the rest of your life. That just does not happen anymore 99% of the time. So you're going to be wanting to continue to build your skills so that you're ready for either the next role within that company or your next job within a new organization. Is this position consistent with your short-term and long-term goals? Is it going to get you where you want to go? And maybe it is going to only get you so far, but if it works for your short-term goals and then you can move to something else longer, farther down the line, it may be the right option for you, even if it doesn't seem like it's exactly where you want to be, in 5 years. It may be the stepping stone you need, but again, evaluating that. How does this job compare to your ideal job? If you have an ideal job in your head, it may not be that you can find that ideal job, but how close is this to it? And what are you going to measure as being the most important pieces of meeting that kind of expectation for what you have in the work that you're going to do? How will this position impact your personal life and relationships? So this goes into things like, you know, many people tell me, well, I want to save some money by living at home and with my family, and so I have geographic restrictions. So that could be something obviously you're going to want to think about on the front end when you're interviewing for jobs, but obviously it's something to consider. Or if you've applied for something that maybe wasn't quite in the area that you thought you're going to be, how is that going to affect your relationships? Do you have a partner that you need to think about what they might do in that organization or in that area as well if you're taking a job with an organization that's somewhere else? So all those things should be taken into consideration. Is the salary acceptable? So obviously if this is the first offer and the salary isn't acceptable, then that's a good sign that you should negotiate. If it's an offer after you've negotiated, is it going to be a salary that is acceptable for you and meets your needs? How are the other elements of the benefits package? So we talked about that. Those are all other pieces that you want to take into consideration as you're evaluating. So before the interview, so another thing that people often come in and say to me is, okay, I've interviewed, I have an offer, now I need to know what I should think about in terms of salary negotiation. And it's fine to do that, but you're actually probably a little bit behind the game if that's what you're doing. You really want to think about salary negotiation and the things that you need to do to prep for salary negotiation before you even interview. Really before you even apply in some instances. So there's research that you want to do because you want to be prepared for the questions that they might ask whenever they ask them in the process. And you want to be using kind of this information so that you are ready to go when they do get to that point where they make an offer. So before the interview even happens, there's some things that you want to do to prepare. So research. You've heard me talk about interviewing, you've heard me talk about researching. You know, we tell you before career fairs, do your research. It's just what you need to do. You need to spend a little bit of time as part of your job search doing research on not just that organization and the role and if you want to work there, but also the pieces that are going to help you research in preparation for thinking about your salary and your compensation package. So one of the things that you're going to want to know is what is a reasonable or appropriate pay rate for the type of position that you're applying for. Now, this can be a little bit challenging because titles aren't the same across the board for the same type of role or position. So you may have to look at a couple of things. You know, it may be that, you know, they're saying it's an entry-level analyst, excuse me, or a junior-level analyst. You know, is that the same thing? Probably, maybe not. But you might have to put in some different search parameters in some of these tools to kind of get a broader idea. And then thinking about the roles and the type of the responsibilities that are a part of that role can also help you as you're looking for what is appropriate pay for this type of position. So these are some links to sites. There's a ton of them out there. And you know, this will be available for you to see on our website as well. But these are some areas, salary.com. LinkedIn is such a great tool in so many ways. And there's a job section that's not just a job board, but it also has salary information. It can be really helpful because it is a lot of times more real-time data. You know, it's people who are working for that organization, maybe have just taken roles within that organization in that position, and they're putting on LinkedIn and letting LinkedIn know what their salary was. So it can be a really good place to see for a particular company, what are the salaries, and then even within the positions. Glassdoor.com, payscale.com, all of these places are good to research both what your position title kind of would be appropriate pay, as well as what does that pay look like in that organization. Also use your contacts, use your network, talk to people. Sometimes it's a little awkward to say, like, what do you make? And people aren't always willing to share that information. But if you can let them know, hey, I'm interested in this role, I'm trying to get a feel for what people in X position make, and I know you work for this company. Would you mind sharing at least kind of what you started out at, or what a range is that usually you think they're offering for this type of role? So you're not having to have them tell you their exact salary, but you might get some idea of some range. So using your network, using informational interviewing. So this is where you might, before the interview even happens, when you're saying, hey, I'd really like to work for XYZ company, find someone in that organization maybe that you can do an informational interview with to find out more about the company culture, find out more if you'd be interested in working there. And one of the things you can maybe talk about is compensation in terms of what are the benefits that they offer, What does it look like in terms of, do they usually negotiate salaries when they make an offer? Can that person give you an idea of it for an entry level, X role? What would be that salary range, in your organization? So that can be another way to do that research. Obviously, cost of living is going to play an effect on salaries. So there are cost of living calculators. So if you are getting a job in Boone versus a salary, if you are offered $55,000 in Boone versus $55,000 in Hickory versus 55 in Sacramento, California, that's going to be different salaries based on the cost of living in that area. In California, that is not going to go as far, 55,000, as it would in either of those other places I mentioned. So looking at cost of living for the area is important to kind of know in terms of what you're going to need for your living, but also remember to take that the companies have taken that into consideration as well. So you'll sometimes see that a similar position in California versus a similar position in North Carolina may pay different. But when it all balances out and you look at cost of living, it's actually really the same salary. So most organizations have already taken that into consideration. So when you negotiate, it's not really a bargaining chip there to say, hey, cost of living is higher out here. They've probably already taken that into consideration, but it's something important for you to know. All of these pieces of research will help you to make decisions about what your acceptable range is based on your needs. So it is good for you to know what it is you'd like to make. It's good for you to know what your walkaway number is. So, if you're going to have some ideal numbers, you're going to have some numbers that you think you'll be in that range, but there's probably also a number that's like, okay, if I don't have any other offers on the table, and this looks like it's the best thing for me in terms of maybe the company and the opportunities for growth, what though is my walkaway number where even if that's good, I can't take it because I can't live on X amount of money. So knowing that walkaway number is important for your benefit. I'm going to tell you though why it's not a bargaining tool again, but it's important for you to know that. Yeah.
When doing your research, would it be a good idea just to have in your head? Because like sometimes when I'm looking at a job, it's easier for me instead of thinking, oh, this is the amount per year salary. It's easier for me to think per hour. Would it, like when you're saying prepare for that, would it also be good to just have both? Because I know sometimes companies will be like, oh, this is your starting stuff. For the first year, it's this. Second year, it'll be this. But it's easier for me when it's per hour. It'd be a good idea to have that already planned as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it helps you to figure out in your mind what that salary translates to for you, I think you can divide it out and see what it would be per hour. Some people like to look at the monthly if you're thinking about my monthly expenses and bills. As far as when the offer comes to you and when you negotiate the offer, you're generally negotiating in terms of annual salary, but it could be helpful for you to kind of think about it in those terms. Yeah, as you're looking at it. Yep. With that walkaway number too, the reason I said it's not really a bargaining chip is that ultimately you can't go into the negotiations and say to them, but I need $40,000 to live or I can't pay my rent and my car payment. They care about you, but they, the fact that you bought a brand new car and have an expensive car payment is not going to be a piece that they're going to say, oh, well, then of course I'm going to give you more money because you have to have that to pay your car payment. So your particular specific needs and your walkaway number are really more for you to know so that you can make those decisions and you can kind of maybe make some decisions about what you want to say in terms of what you'd like to see as your offer or what the range you'd like to be in. There's all kinds of resources out there. So I'm not the only person to talk about this. There's all kinds of YouTube videos. I mentioned one here from a Harvard Business School professor. It's about negotiation in general, but then specifically relates to salary and job offers. Lots of things out there to maybe help you in this process. So once you've done this research and you have some ideas on what maybe those salary ranges are going to look like for your particular role, company, location, then we step into things about what else do you need to know as part of your salary negotiations. So you need to believe. You need to believe in your value and you need to know what you are offering. what is your value add for that organization? So you want to reflect, which you probably are going to be doing this anyway, hopefully for the interview and for being able to sell yourself in that interview to them. But you want to reflect on the concrete value you bring to that company, and then be sure that you know what's unique about you. What are your special accomplishments? What are the skills that are really going to align with what they need and maybe even go beyond what they were expecting? What are your positive traits? What are your selling points that you're trying to sell yourself on in the interview that then will put you maybe above someone else that's interviewing for that position, or just make you more attractive and exciting to them, so that then when you're negotiating based on the value that you bring to that organization, your value add. You're negotiating because you're an asset that they want. They've already expressed by the time you get an offer that they want you to be a part of their organization. Now you're just saying, hey, you know, I think that this is a really great offer, but I'm also bringing my skills in this. I've done my additional work in business analytics. So on top of the skills that you are looking for, I'm going to have some additional pieces to help in my role. So that's, you know, where you're basing some of those, here's why I'm worth more kind of ideas. So for one example, you might be able to talk about something like this. This person would say, my background in running my own small landscaping business for 3 years gave me a breadth of experience in everything from budget to project management, as well as highlighting that I have initiative and grit. My business education has added to my knowledge in analyzing data and project management. Given my background and skill set, I believe a starting salary of $55,000 is an appropriate base salary. So that might be when you're coming back with a negotiation, and that's kind of your negotiated offer that you're going to. It might also be the answer to a question if they ask you, what is it that your expectations are? But we'll talk about that as well. So the other thing that you can do ahead of time is to practice. Role play it. Think about, well, what am I going to say if they respond back to me in this way? Particularly if it makes you nervous to think about coming back at someone that's already made you an offer that's a perfectly good offer, but it's not really what you were thinking. You have to be able to be confident in yourself, believe in yourself, and know that you have the backing up and the reason of the research to do that negotiation. So if you can role play a little bit with someone that you trust, that might make you feel more comfortable. You can even just record yourself making kind of some of these statements and negotiating back and see where you might need the areas of improvement. You can outline some different scenarios and write down, well, if they come back with this kind of thing, here's something else I could say. Here are my strengths that I can, you know, sell my idea that I'm a more valuable asset to them. Some rules of negotiation here, some things to think about. So one would be to be patient. If possible, you want to delay this conversation as long as possible. You want to delay it until you have an offer from them. So you want to hopefully be patient in that you're waiting until they make that offer before you even have to get into discussions of what, you know, your salary might be and what you're looking for. So postponing salary negotiations until you're offered the job is really the best. You know, let the other side make their offer first. Now, that doesn't always happen, or it's not always easy to do that, because sometimes you're asked for an amount earlier in the process. If you're asked for an amount on an application, which sometimes you are, they say, you know, put your salary requirements on this application or in your cover letter, they're using that then as a screening tool. So ideally, you don't want to do that. You want to maybe, if you feel like you can avoid answering that question, that's an option for you. If it's sort of like one of these forms and you're forced to put an amount in there, then you got to start thinking about what you're going to do. So if you can put words in there and not just a numerical amount, you might be able to, you know, say something along the lines of, I'd like to explore this position more, to learn more about those requirements before I would have a salary requirements that I'd be comfortable giving. So you can put some language in there or put that in your cover letter. If you were just forced into giving a number, that's where you want to think about all the research that you've done. And hopefully you're able to give them a number. If you can give a range, great. If you can't even give a range and you have to give a number, you want it to be higher than your walkaway number. You don't want it to be unreasonable number as well, though, because if it's too high, then you're going to go, well, we can never pay that person out. We're not going to interview them. You want to do everything you can to get them to see you and your skills and want you before the money situation comes into play. So if you have to put something in there, think about that range that you've developed based on your research and go mid to high, but don't, still stay within the right stratosphere of reasonable range there. If you're asked verbally during an interview, sometimes that'll happen fairly early on in the interview process. They want to know a little bit about what your salary expectations are. So again, if you can defer and delay and kind of skirt around that answer, that's great. Obviously, you want to be polite in doing that. And if you can politely respond back to them with, again, saying, I'm really excited about everything I'm learning about your organization. I've done a lot of research on ABC Corporation, but as we're talking more, I'd like to learn more about this particular role, what your expectations are, and what I can offer you before we talk about salary negotiation or before we talk about salary requirements. I'm sure we're going to come up to something that's reasonable for both of us, when I've learned a little bit more. So hopefully, if you do that politely and they're like, okay, and they'll move on, and you've not done anything to kind of give them a salary that puts you in or out of contention there. If they really force you to, say, well, really, we need to know, then again, you're going to have some sort of number to give them. So that's why it's important to have done this research and have that kind of in your back pocket to be able to talk about. Again, if you're conversing, when we get really into salary negotiations and you're getting to that final space, I say don't give a range, give a single number. But in that case, if they're forcing you early on in the process to give them salary requirements, then I would give a range. Again, bumping it up a little bit on that mid to higher side, but give them a range. And next, rule of negotiation, there's 2, be silent. So when you are offered a salary, if they call and offer you the position, they let you know what the salary is, you don't have to say something right away. You don't have to jump to a response because oftentimes you haven't had a time to process that or think about it. So what you should be doing is maybe repeating back to them what you hear them saying. You can express your interest and enthusiasm and excitement for the role and the position and the opportunity to be a part of their team. But you can let them know that you want to take your time to consider that offer. They hope that you do that, right? They don't want you to be making some snap, great, I got offered a job, so I'm taking it decision. So they expect you to take some time to review and reflect that. If anything's unclear, you want to clarify that. And so if possible, you want to ask them if they can give you that offer, in writing via email or sending you that offer so that you can really take a look at it and evaluate all the pieces. If they just give you the salary, it's again an opportunity to say, I'd love to hear about the complete compensation package you're offering before I make my decision. Can you send that to me? So a way to get all that information. And then you can take time to prepare your counter offer. You're not having to on the spot go into that negotiation. Be knowledgeable. So we've already talked about all the research that you need to be doing and can be doing so that you can come back with an aggressive but reasonable offer. As long as you're tactful and reasonable in your negotiations, this is not going to be a bad thing. Like I have yet in my 20 plus years of doing this, had somebody come back to me and say, I asked for a higher salary and they withdrew my offer. They're not going to withdraw their offer. They may come back to you and say, I'm sorry, but there's just no way we can go that high, or there's no way we can negotiate the salary. This is our best and final offer. Well, then you can say back to them, great, I'd like some more time to think about that because this is really interesting and great opportunity. But I was hoping for a little bit more to go along with my skill sets. Let me take some time to think about that. So they're not going to withdraw their offer 99.9% of the time. They're not going to withdraw if you are tactful and polite and knowledgeable in the request that you've made. If the request is rejected when you're doing your salary negotiations, you want to be sure that if you want to do any kind of second pushback or ask for something different, that again, you have the knowledge to back it up and you have that knowledge about yourself and those assets, that we talked about, the value add that you're giving, so that you can use that to justify what you're asking for. You're not just saying, well, I think I deserve $60,000. You're giving a reason why that is the number that you're coming back to them with. Be flexible. If there's no movement on salary, and that may be the case. Like I said, some places really do want to get the best talent possible. And so their philosophy is, I'm going to offer you the best salary I can offer you from the front, from the get-go. Some companies go lower because they know and hope that you're going to actually, tell them more about your value. And so they know there's a negotiation process. So you're not necessarily going to know which one you're dealing with. You might if you've done some research and have some ins with the company. But if they come back to you and say, first offer is best offer with our organization, they're not lying to you. You need to take that to heart and then move forward. If they say, this is our absolute best offer, you can then come back and just say, that is amazing, that you are interested in me and from this organization. Seems like a reasonable salary offer, but there are some things because of the value I bring with X, Y, and Z that I was hoping that maybe we could look at other parts of the compensation package to talk about. So you could gently push back on other pieces and be flexible in what you're negotiating for. Extra paid leave, moving expenses, those things we talked about in the compensation package. And then finally, be brave. You don't want your biggest regret as you start into this new role with this company. It may even be your first professional role. You don't want your biggest regret is to be that you realized that you didn't even try to at least negotiate something and that you left money on the table. And you may or may not ever know that if you don't negotiate, but inevitably, you're going to talk to someone, a colleague that's in your same role, and they're going to be like, yeah, they offered me that too, but I was able to negotiate for $5,000 more. So you don't know, and it's not always going to be something that you might find out, but you might have some regrets if you don't give it a try. So even though you might not get your exact salary that you were hoping for, what you pushed back for, you're going to at least get more or the same. Right? They're not going to come back and renege, and they're not going to come back and say, well, now we can only offer you 50,000 instead of 55 because you asked for more. So the worst that can happen usually is that you're at the same level. And then, even if you don't achieve exactly what you asked for, they're probably going to go up a little bit, and now you've gained something. Some other things to consider and just the do's and the don'ts. And we've already kind of touched on a lot of these things. So I'm just going to let you kind of take a look at those and see if you have any questions on any of them. You always want to think about this from a win-win situation so that it is a conversation and it is done from a good place of consensus that you have applied for this role because you want to work there. They want you to work for them. So you're already in agreement there. So now you're moving forward with the salary negotiation. We've talked about the timing and hopefully waiting and countering after they offer you that salary with the job offer. You do want to be, of course, appreciative. Anytime you can express your enthusiasm for the position, your enthusiasm for the company, your appreciation for them making that offer to you, it's a good thing to do. You're going to research. You want to use some effective communication skills. Again, polite, professional, and backed by your research and your knowledge of what you're bringing to them and what you're offering them in terms of your skills. You want to try not to talk too much. Don't start thinking, okay, they're being silent for a second, so I'm going to need to put in more information here and start making stuff up about your assets and your skills and what you're bringing or something like that to fill the space. You want to be sure that that's why if you thought about it ahead of time, you kind of know what you're going to go in and say. They may come back to you with some counters or some questions, and you might hopefully have some ideas of responses, but you don't want to over talk. Again, we talked about personal needs for negotiation aren't really going to be a big draw. So saying, I really need more because I've got this brand new car payment, or I really need more because, I want to live alone. I don't want to have a roommate. And so I'm going to need more money. Like none of those things are going to move the dial for you. So you want to be sure that you're using the right negotiation tactics. So some language ideas. It's helpful maybe to see and hear some of these kind of thoughts on how you can respond to some of these things. So if you are asked for like kind of what that salary expectation maybe is, this could be something that you could answer if you're pressed, that you're letting them know that you've done some research and comparable positions in the Raleigh area that include project management. So maybe they've offered you something that's a little low or, but they weren't considering the fact that this position seems to have more to it than others that you've researched. Then you can say, this one includes project management. So I think the average closer to $55,000 to $60,000 yearly is more in line with what I've researched. Again, this next one expresses your enthusiasm about the position. And stating again that you're going to bring value. I appreciate the offer of $50,000, but was really expecting to be more in the $55,000 range based on, and this is where you're going to insert your value. My experience, my internship experience that I've already had, education, my initiative, the drive that I've shown in starting my own landscaping business, as well as the average range of those in similar positions in the Charlotte area that I researched. Can we look at a salary of $55,000 for this position? So you see there as well, as I was saying, like that was a one number kind of thing. And what this 55 should be is this 55 is not your walkaway number. And it's probably not even your mid-range number. The 55 should be more at the top of what you have thought about as your range or what's reasonable, aggressive, but reasonable, remember? So it's best to not give a range once you get to that. Hopefully once you get to the actual negotiating and you're able to tell them what your assets are and what you're bringing to the table, you're hopefully going to go with a number, because it's much easier for you to get that number then, or for them to come back to slightly lower than if you went into this and said, can we look at a salary in the range of 50 to 55,000? Well, then they're going to go, well, sure, we can go to 50, but you weren't able to negotiate to that higher level. Then. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on asking the employer for a budget?
I'm sorry, for what?
Like an overall budget for the position.
Like for what you're able to do within the role, like a budget that you're given? Yeah. You could ask about some of those types of pieces. If you're thinking about a budget for like professional development and some of those types of areas, that could be a negotiating piece. They may or may not let you know kind of what your budget responsibilities are going to be within the position, but there might be an opportunity to ask for professional development budget money or something like that for additional training, those kinds of things. Yeah. Some other language ideas. Again, we're going to start with the buttering them up and letting them know that this is an exciting opportunity and offer. I'd really like to chance to discuss the base salary, moving expenses, and start date. Are these things we could find time to discuss? So maybe this is when you're contacting back the recruiter or the person that you're working with. Maybe this could even be in an email, although you hopefully want to do your actual negotiating in person or over the phone, like actually with someone in real time rather than via email if you can help it. But you might broach the topic that, hey, I'd really like to discuss these things. So that gives them a chance to know what it is that you're going to be wanting to put on the table. So in this case, we said base salary, but we also let them know that moving expenses and the start date are something we'd also like to discuss. The next one, while I've done some research on ABC, I would like to learn and talk more about the role and how I would fit in your organization before we talk salary. That might be an answer early on in the interview process. They ask you about salary requirements. This next one would be if somebody comes back and says, oh, I'd love to help you out there and go higher on the salary, but I don't have the authority to do that. You could push back a little bit on that one and say, that you understand that they have some constraints. Maybe they say, I really am trying to be equitable with, everyone that I'm hiring into this role. So I don't really have the authority to do that. If they say that, there obviously is someone, they're not saying our company doesn't, this is the best offer. They're saying they don't have the authority. So you could push back a little bit and say that you're willing to wait until they have a chance to talk to someone who could, make that decision. Internal equity issues, that might be something they come back with, and you can let them know that you appreciate that. But if there's no change that can be made in base salary, can we look at moving expenses? Can we look at, something else that you're ready and prepared to negotiate on as part of that package? Another thing to do is if they say, you know what, this is the offer that we can make, we can't budget at all on that salary. You could ask for, say, okay, can we start at X amount of money, but then review in 6 months? For a lot of positions, there's maybe on a yearly review cycle. And so that review then usually is tied to whether you're going to get a raise or a bump in pay. So if you have to wait a whole year, obviously you're going to be a whole year at whatever salary they initiated. If you can maybe say, hey, I'd like to prove myself for the first 6 months, but go ahead and have my review be at 6 months and look at it, what I'm producing for you at that point. You got to be willing then to know that you're going to really produce for them for those 6 months and that they're going to want to give you more money, but that could be something you could negotiate as an earlier review cycle. Some things not to say. Some of these seem pretty obvious, and because I know everybody in here is going to be polite and professional in their interactions, but sometimes people get a little excited and overconfident in what they're able to, pull in as the salary. And so I just want to make sure that these kind of things are out there. So a couple of these we've already again discussed. You don't necessarily just want to say, they say, we'd like to offer you this position and we'd like to offer you X amount of money. You don't want to just say, great, I accept X amount of money. You really, even if you think you're not going to negotiate, you still want to take time to consider that offer. Just saying I'm looking for X amount and leaving it at that doesn't give any kind of sales pitch for why that you're worth that amount. So you always want to be sure that you're backing up whatever you're asking for with some information about, like, based on the research I've done, based on the fact that I'm also bringing with this a certificate in social media marketing, whatever it might be that you think is your value add, you want to add that to that money amount. That's all you're offering me. Probably not going to put a good taste in their mouth. Just flat out saying no also isn't really the best way to build professional relationships. Even if you're like, there's no way that they're going to come up to where I want them to be, or you've just decided that this isn't the organization for you, you still want to be appreciative of that offer and say, you know what, I think I've got some other offers on the table that really are going to meet my needs a little bit better. You want to give them some sort of reason. You want to be sure you're not burning any bridges. So going with this statement, I have other outstanding offers right now that are much more lucrative. One that isn't worded in the nicest way. And then just the idea of using other offers is something you can do, but you want to be really careful with that. So if you do have other outstanding offers, but you really want to work for A company rather than B company, you could say to A company, you know what, I'm so excited about this, and this reasons for working for you all at A company, but I did get an offer. You can decide whether you want to disclose where that offer was. They may ask or not, but you could say, but I did get an offer for another position and they are willing to pay X amount of money. Is there any way that we could look at this salary and get closer to that point or get to that point? Because you're really where I'd like to start my next steps in my career. They may ask back what company. So the reason I'm saying that is you don't ever want to lie. You don't ever want to make up an offer to try and negotiate and use that as a counter. If you really have offers out there and want to use them, you can do that in a professional way. But if you don't have offers out there, don't make something up, because inevitably it's going to come back and you're going to kind of get caught in that potentially. And then that's just going to leave a really bad taste in your mouth. And they can then withdraw an offer based on if the integrity that they see there is different or if you've lied to them. You shouldn't be coming out and saying, well, this is my final and last offer. They may say that to let you know that the negotiation this is as far as it'll go, but you don't want to be the one to be like, this is my final offer, I'm walking away if you don't give me this. That's again, not really negotiating for that win-win. We talked about this already, why your needs aren't exactly the way to do the negotiation. You need to know what they are, but you need to not use them as a negotiating bargaining chip. Also, don't start your negotiations with, I hate to ask, but would you be willing to pay me $55,000 instead of $50,000? That's a weak point, a passive way to approach this. And while we don't want to be overly aggressive, we do want to be aggressive and confident in our negotiation. And the truth is, you don't hate to ask for this. You don't hate to ask for more money. And you're asking for it because you believe you deserve it. So you don't need to preface it with, I hate to ask. The least I'd be willing to accept is X. You don't want to go again with that bottom number, your walkaway number. We don't want to call names. We don't want to say that's a cheap or lousy offer. Or be overly egocentric and confident and say, but I'm worth so much more. If you think you're worth more, you can ask for it and tell them why you are bringing more value to their organization with what you have in terms of your skills. So that would be a way to go there. Some quick additional tips so that you guys can let me know if you have any questions. Counter offers can be aggressive but reasonable. I think we've kind of covered that, but just keep that in mind. Knowing your walkaway number is important. Definitely ask for those offers in writing so that you can evaluate them and really see what it is that you're getting as part of that total compensation package. Try to have salary negotiations with the decision maker if you can. So if you've been interviewing with the person who supervised you, they're probably a decision maker in terms of the salary. But it might be that the person who offered you the position is like an HR person or the recruiter who initially connected with you. You could try to do some salary negotiation with them, but they're probably going to say that they need to talk to X person who would be your supervisor or something like that. So if you can, negotiate with the person that you feel like is probably the decision maker here. Again, we talked about negotiating base salary first and then tackling other issues. You want to be honest but optimistic in what the salary negotiations could look like. So that's honest both with them and with yourself. Like if you do your research and you know that, $75,000 just isn't in the cards for someone with your education level and skill set, then be honest with yourself and know that that's probably not going to be where you're going to reach with your negotiation. Some companies, as I said, truly are first offer, best offer. So just be aware of that. So while I said definitely try and negotiate, just be aware that there might be some organizations that cannot negotiate or at least cannot negotiate the salary piece. The times are changing, obviously, with everything that's always evolving in the world of work. Remote work obviously is a big changing thing right now in terms of, is that a part of the compensation package? Is that negotiable? Is that something that you want? So thinking about all these things, obviously the economy and what that looks like in your particular field and industry is important to be aware of, because it might be where they are offering bonus offers and raising up those salaries because they are more desperate. Whereas in some fields, it just is the way it is. And it might be right now that they don't really have to do that because they're inundated with people that want to work for them. With particular companies that maybe everybody wants to work for, again, they may not need to offer bonuses or do that because they have such a pool of people that are wanting those positions. So keeping all that kind of change in mind is really important to do as well. All right, I know we're up to the end of our time, but are there any questions I can answer related to some of the things we've discussed or things that you were hoping you were going to get out of a discussion on salary negotiation? Anything out there in virtual world, you're welcome to put it in the chat or unmute and let me know. Yeah.
Is there a certain amount of time that negotiations last?
Yeah, okay, so the question is there a certain amount of time that negotiations usually last? It can vary. Usually when someone makes an offer to you, they're going to say, we'd like to hear back from you in 3 days or a week. Oftentimes it's not more than that, but you can ask for more time. And that's reasonable to do. They may or may not be able to offer you that time, but that's something you can do. Usually if you're doing a negotiating, if you've gotten the offer and they'd say, we'd like to hear back from you in 3 days, you can say, great, I'd like some time to look over this. If I have any questions, are you the person who I should, connect back with if I have questions about the compensation package? That way, literally, if you have questions, you know who to ask, but also you might then be able to approach them with, that phrase that we had about, can we look at, some possibilities of something different with the salary? So you want to get back to them before that time frame is up that they've given you. So generally, this whole process, if you come back to them and say, I'd like to talk about the salary, you might have a conversation and they may be able to make a decision on the spot if they're a decision maker. And then again, you'll go back and say, that's wonderful that you're able to offer that. I'd like just a day or two more to make sure that, it's the best for all of us that if I accept this offer. And so you can still take time, even if they agree to your demands, if they agree to what you've asked for. They may say, I'm going to have to get back with you on that. Usually you can expect, hopefully, to get that they're going to be pretty prompt in getting back with you. So if it's been more than a couple of days, you might just give them a polite, just wondering if you come to any decisions about what we discussed. So really the whole process, generally too, if they've made an offer, you've made a counter offer, they're going to come back with their either saying, we can't do that, or their acceptance of your offer, or somewhere in between. For most people, you've gotten to the point where you've already told them everything you're bringing to the table. And so you're probably making a decision then on that new offer, if there's a new offer. If it still feels like, it's just not what I want, or, you know, they weren't able to come any higher in salary, but maybe I'd like to ask now for, you know, some other piece of that package. You could go back that one more time and say that, and then they'll come back to you. That's usually the end of the rent. Like if you just keep going back, that gets to be more to that unprofessional side, and then they're just going to be more irritated by it. So generally that bounce back and forth is only going to be sort of that 2 rounds. And usually, as I said, it's going to happen within a fairly short period of time. Does that answer the question?
Something that I found helpful and more efficacious in my situation was to negotiate versus a salary position to an hourly position, because then that creates the opportunity for overtime pay.
Yeah, so just like you were talking about with kind of evaluating it by hourly position, that might be something to consider. It really depends a lot of times, again, on the organization and your field. But yeah, sometimes that could be something you look to do. Just be aware too that sometimes hourly pay comes with different restrictions or benefits than a salary position does. So, you know, I take that into consideration as you're making that negotiation, but that could be something, yeah, in different situations. And all of this, you have to take your situation into account. I mean, we can't cover kind of every base in every scenario. So there could be some different things here, but hopefully you've got the basis now for a comfort level with asking for what you feel like you deserve based on what you're able to offer that company.
How many resources for looking into relocation expenses and what I should ask for?
Yep.
I'm considering an offer out in Texas. I obviously can't afford on a college budget to put out there myself.
Yeah. So the question was about relocation expenses and maybe resources on figuring out what to ask for. So what I probably do, since you know specifically where it is that you're going, I probably do it. There are some relocation calculators out there, but it's usually more about cost of living differences. Yeah. So I would probably do a little bit of research, if you can, on like, you know, based on your amount of stuff. A moving truck, you know, would cost X amount of money. It's going to take me, or, you know, if I'm going to drive out there myself with a moving truck, what does it take to rent it? Pay for someone to help me load it, gas, or if you're going to use a moving company, like what would that look like? It's going to take me 2 days to drive out there, and so I'm going to need a hotel room. Kind of come up yourself with sort of a budget.
All right, so like go ahead and like get a quote from like a moving company or something.
Yeah.
Like an external resource.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest doing, and then you can decide what seems, with the way your relationship has gone with the company, what would be most advantageous when you come back to them, to be able to say, you know, I investigated and it's, you know, X company is going to charge X amount for me to move. You know, would you all be able to cover that expense? That would be one way to go. Or another way would just be to use the research you gain, and if it looks like, okay, it's going to cost, you know, around $3,500 to $4,500 for me to move. Maybe when I go back to them, I'll ask for $5,000 moving, you know, expenses. If that, they also know kind of what's reasonable, you know, given some of that thing. So if it seems like it's in a reasonable range based on your research, you could ask just for an amount, or you could go straight to, you know, it's going to cost me X. Would you be able to reimburse the moving company that as a part of my package? Yeah. Any other questions that can answer? Well, I thank you all very much for your time and attention. This is recorded, so it will be available on our Business for Services website if you would like to review something that we talked about, or to tell other people about the opportunity to use this as a resource. Again, we have future C2C workshops coming up that I think are going to be really helpful, as well as our opportunities for the career fair. If you would like to make an appointment with your career coach, I'm one of the career coaches, and then Dylan Waskenbach is the other career coach in our office. If you go into Handshake to make an appointment, our times will come up with our availability based on your major and who you're kind of assigned to, but we'd be happy to kind of discuss some things further with you based on your situation. You know, we're available for all those different pieces of your career search. So Thank you all very much and have a great night.